Hello friends. In the last session we have seen how to write exception for uh, how to handle the exception by using try and catch, and in that we have seen how to write try and catch, and we have seen the statements that this is a statement, this is giving an exception, this may give an exception, so this is statement we have placed inside a try and catch, right? Inside a try and catch. So same way, again this statement also may give an exception, that also we have placed one within one try and another catch, right? So this statement also may give an exception, and there is also again in try and catch, right? So for each statement we are writing one separate try and catch block in this. But if we write like this, say we have 100 lines of code, and say there are 50 lines of code may give an exception, and all that statements we need to put within a try and catch block, right? So this is actually decreases the readability of the program. And say if in this scenario, if this statement gives an exception, then it's definite that this statement is also going to get an exception. And if this is giving an exception, then this statement also definitely gives an exception. Then if first statement itself gives an exception, then why unnecessarily to execute this catch block, this try block, again catch block, again try block, and again catch block, right? All these remaining executions are actually of no use, because the first statement, this statement, when gives an exception, then remaining two statements will definitely give an exception. So two things here we have to notice, that for each statement we have written one try and one catch, for another statement another try and another catch. Like this, for each statement we have written multiple try and catch blocks, which actually decreases the readability of the application of the program. Or another problem is, when this statement gives exception, unnecessarily why to execute the remaining statements, because these are also definitely going to give some exception. So to overcome with this problem, what we can do is, we can put one try and catch block, and whatever statement giving some exceptions, all that statement we can place under one try and catch, right? Or say this I'll write now, it is in this way. So what I will do is, say you have the code like this. So I can write the code in this way. Say I have class test, the same class only will take again. So I have we have class, some class ABC, in that public static void and main method string type args, right? And in that first statement is say main started, and then you can write the statements select this string s is equal to args of 0, and int say x is equal to integer dot parse int of say s, and int y is equal to 10 divided by x, right? So these three statements, all the three statements we have written together, and I'll write one try and only one catch block, sorry, not one catch block, say catch, and this, right? This is the catch block. Now when you execute this program, execute this program, and when you will write this args of 0, when you when control is at this point, say string s is equal to args of 0, and if you are executing in this way, say Java and abc and just this, no other statements, means you are not supplying any command line argument in this. If you do like this, then args of 0 will get array index out of bounds exception, and here this is array index out of bound exception. To handle this array index out of bounds exception, we need a reference variable of type array index out of bounds exception in catch block. So I'm writing here, say array index out of bound exception, say it is e, right? And here I'll write one SOP statement e, and I'll print e, and say SOP statement, same message I'll give, say enter command line argument, something, right? So when you are writing this statement, so Java and ABC just execute in this way, then no command line argument is applied. Args of 0 gives an exception called array index out of bounds exception, and for that I have designed one catch block, right? One catch block. Then if this statement gives exception object is generated here, and then JVM checks is there any catch block is there which can where a reference variable is there which can point to this object. So this catch block is there and it is going to point into this, right? So this exception is handled, and this catch block control is inside the catch block, and catch block is going to execute all the statements, right? But if assume the first statement is not giving any exception, and I'll write like this, say Java and ABC say hi, right? If I write like this and press enter, you are supplying one command line argument. Now this statement, when the program started execution, say main started executed, okay, control is inside the try block, and you try to say here args of 0. When you say args of 0, then 0th index high is there, and high is going to store into s, this value is high. So this statement is not giving any exception now. If no exception, then control comes at the next statement, right? So in previous case, when this statement was giving an exception, in this point you have to notice that when this statement is giving an exception object is generated, then JVM checks is there any catch block is defined with this try which can handle this object, or which are having this type of reference variable. So catch block is found. Then from here the control directly moves to the catch block, and this two statement was not executed. It has not tried even to execute, right? First statement, when this statement gets the exception, from here only the control immediately moves to this catch block, because matching catch block is found, and remaining statement of the try block is not going to execute, right? This is important point you have to remember. Next, when you write in this way high, now first statement executed successfully and s is having high, and then control moves to the next statement. Now in this high, s value is high, and high should be converted to integer, which is not possible. So now here this is going to give an exception, and this exception is of type number format exception, right? This is number format exception. Now again, when the exception raised in the try block in this statement, JVM checks the corresponding catch block is available in this or not. Here we have a catch block, but this catch block is going to store can hold an object which is of type array index out of bounds exception. But in these we are getting the object of type number format exception, which is not of same type of this reference variable type. So JVM will check, okay, corresponding catch block is found, but this catch block cannot hold this object because the type is not matching. So what will happen in this case, the object again flows to the caller, and in this case it is inside the main method, so the caller is the JVM and this object moves to the JVM. So this exception is not going to be handled. Means this catch block can handle only those exception which is from generating from the try block, and the exception type is array index out of bounds exception. Other than array index out of bounds exception, this catch block cannot handle any other type of exception, right? So now this statement, the second statement in try block, is giving an exception, that is number format exception, and this catch block cannot handle it. If it cannot be handled by this catch block, then this object again moves to the caller, and the remaining statement of your main function is not going to execute. So to hold this exception, what you have to do here is we have to take one more catch block and in this, the reference variable type should be number format exception. So this is E. Here again I'll print SOP statement E, and I'll print SOP statement enter 1 int value as command line argument, right? Enter one integer value as command line argument. Now when the second statement gives an exception, then from the second statement, when the exception object is raised, from here immediately the control comes to this catch block with this E, means immediately E starts pointing to this object, and now control is at this point. Now here you have to notice that the first statement is not giving any exception, okay fine. Second statement is giving exception, and when the exception object is raised here, from this statement control moves to the corresponding catch block. It comes into this catch block, and in this catch block this too starts execution. Now in this statement was not executed, and this catch block is also not executed, right? So from here you have to notice, in try block, when any statement, in one try block you can have multiple statements, multiple type of exceptions also can be raised from the same try block. But in try block, when any statement gives an exception, then remaining statement of the try block is not going to be executed. This is one important point you have to remember. Second is, when any exception is there in try block, from that point control goes to the corresponding catch block if available, and that catch block starts execution. Remaining catch block is not going to execute. If the corresponding type of catch block is not found, then the exception is not handled, and from here the object moves to the caller, and the remaining statement of your application is not going to execute, right? So this is second line, gives number format exception, and from here control comes to this directly, and this catch block starts execution. Now assume I am executing like this, Java and ABC 10, or say it is not 10, say it is ABC and it is 2, Java, ABC and 2. If I do like this, then what will happen? Start again from the beginning, main started okay, and in this args of 0, down now S value is 2, and parse int of 2 you are converting to this integer type, so this is also valid, no exception in this block, in this statement. So control comes to the next statement. In next statement, 10 divided by x means it is 10 divided by 2. You are going to get a 5, and 5 is going to store into y, right? So no exception. In this case, no exception. If no exception, no catch block is going to be executed, and finally it comes directly to the end of the main method. But what if I give here like this, Java, ABC and 0? If I give 0, now what will happen? 0 is going to store into S, okay. This 0 is going to convert into integer type, that is also okay. But the x value is now 10 divided by 0. When I try to divide this value with 0, here you are going to get an exception of type arithmetic exception. This is arithmetic exception, right? You are going to get arithmetic exception. Now what JVM will do? JVM will check first catch block. First catch block is matching with this type, this is arithmetic exception, and this is error index out of bounds exception, not matching. Second catch block verify. Second catch block is of type number format exception, and that is actually arithmetic exception, again not matching. So matching catch block is not found. So this is not going to execute, this is also not going to execute, means these catch blocks are not able to handle this exception object. So this moves to the caller method, that is JVM, and again remaining statement is not going to execute. So what we can do is, again you take one more catch block, and here you define that is arithmetic exception E, and here you write SOP statement of E, and you write SOP statement of enter 1 non-zero int value as command line argument, right? So this is catch block. Now this catch block is able to handle that exception, so this is going to be handled, and remaining statement is going to execute continuously, right? Now all the corresponding catch block is available, and finally SOP statement of main ends and finish, right? So this is what we did here is one try block and having multiple statements. One try block is having multiple statements, and it is having multiple catch block. Catch block 1, some argument, then again catch block 2, some argument, and like this. One try block can have multiple catch blocks. But you have to remember that when one try block is having multiple statements, when one statement gives execution, remaining statements are not going to execute. Important point. Next, when any statement gives an exception, it checks corresponding catch block is available or not. If corresponding catch block is found, then that corresponding catch block is going to execute directly, and control from the try block, it directly flows to the corresponding catch block, and that catch block start execution, and then control comes to the end of the try and catch, and remaining statement is going to execute. When try block is having any exception and corresponding catch block is not available to hold that, then exception is not handled. Even when you have try and catch, an exception moves to the caller, and remaining statement is not going to execute, right? So one try block and multiple catch blocks. Now this we will try with an example with Eclipse. So this only I'll modify. Say you have this function, and now I'll modify this in this way. One try block, and in this is not required. You put here inside the same try and catch. This is also not here. Instead you put it here. And this try is not required. It should directly catch, and this is also not required. Directly come to catch. Right, so this is. Now the try block is having 3 statements. Right? And now these 3 also now need to declare outside, because we are accessing from the same location. So here only I'll write it is string s, and this is int x, and this is int y, right? Int y. Now if I don't give any value first time, say first time I am not giving anything, I'll just execute Java, and so I'll execute like this first time. In console if you write, and I'll print say Java, and say it is test1, then what should happen? When test1 will execute, no command line argument is found, and then this should give a array index out of bounds exception, right? And when this will give a array index out of bounds exception, the corresponding catch block is this one, right? Corresponding catch block is this one. So this is going to hold it, and remaining these 2 statement is not going to execute, so no chance to get any exception. So first statement only giving the exception, and the corresponding catch block is this, so this is going to execute, right? And here it will print E is array index out of bounds exception, and enter command line argument. And because the exception is handled, this statement gives exception, this is handled, remaining is not giving any exception, and continues, and it gives here main ends. But here y is not found, because y here we have declared. So I'll take this as outside, say it is int y, and y should be initialized with 0 first, because it is local variable. So now it is this, y remains 0, and this is main ends, and it is run configuration, and arguments. In these arguments I am not giving anything, so apply and run, right? It is main started, array index out of bounds exception, and enter one command line argument, y value is 0, and main ends. So it is executing this catch block, right? This catch block. Now if I give something like this, say it is Java and test1, and it is high. Now array index out of bound exception will not come, because s gets high, and when it will try to execute this, high should be converted into integer type, which is actually not possible. So what it will do, it will give an exception which is called as number format exception, and number format exception corresponding catch block is this. This is going to handle that number format exception. So here it will print number format exception, enter int value as command line argument, then y remains 0 and main ends, right? Now run it, run configuration, and give here high, command line argument is high, apply and run. So this is main started, number format exception, and this is actually message. Okay, this is actually message. We are going to see that how to generate a message, and this is we have given enter int type value as command line argument, y value remains 0, and this is main ends. So this catch block is going to handle the exception. Now if I give 0, say if I give 0 here, then this should be say Java and test 1, and it is 0. If I give 0, now this is okay, even this is also fine, this two statement no exception, and this is having the exception. And if this gives the exception, exception will be of arithmetic exception type, so this catch block is going to print and remaining executes in the same way. Now run again and run configuration, and this is 0. Apply and run. Right, it is arithmetic exception, enter one non-zero int value as command line argument, 0 y value, and this main ends. Right, now if I execute it like this, Java and test 1 and say 2, then no exception, right? 2 is going to store into S, 2 is convertible to integer type, and 10 divided by 2 gives 5. So y is initialized with 5. No exception is found in try block. If try block having no exception, then no catch block is going to execute. Directly it comes here, it prints 5, and this is main ends. So run it, run configuration, and you give here 2. Right, it is 2. Apply and run. So main started 5 and main ends. Right, so this is done successfully, no problem. So one try block now having multiple catch block, and in one try block you are having multiple statements which may generate different types of exceptions. Now assume when I am writing multiple catch block with one try block, and say the catch block, this is the catch block I am not writing, right? One catch block is not there. Now two catch block, array index out of bounds exception and arithmetic exception. Now from your try block, if try block is generating any exception which is of these two type, any one of these two type, then that can be handled. So this catch block can handle an exception which is array index out of bounds exception, and this catch block can handle an exception which is arithmetic exception. Other than these two type of exception, if any other exception is coming from your try block, then corresponding catch block is found and the exception is not going to be handled. And if it is not handled, of course it moves to the JVM and program execution is terminates, right? So this two statement is not going to execute. So now if I say this statement, this gives a number format exception, and number format exception catch block is not available. Now when it will give number format exception, so I will run it, run configuration, and here the value is high. If I give high, then high gives a number format exception, and now see it is not handled. Main started, number format exception, this output is coming from the default handler of JVM, and main ends and y value is not printing because the exception was not handled by any one of these two catch block, and it has moved to the JVM. Right, so control was not reached at this point. From here only exception is raised and exception was not handled, so from here exception moved to the JVM, along with that control also gone. So remaining statement is not executing, right? So if multiple catch blocks are there in your try block, then the exception which is coming from the try block should have a matching corresponding type of catch block. If the matching corresponding type of catch block is not found, then the exception which is coming from the try block is not going to be handled, okay, and the program execution will be terminated. So this catch block is also there. Right, now when you write this way multiple catch blocks, instead of writing here I have 100 lines of code, 100 lines of code may give 100 different types of exception. So these many catch blocks you have to write again. So instead of doing that, what we can do is we'll take one super type reference variable, and which is going to handle all these type of exceptions which is coming from the try block. Now you know the class hierarchy, exception class hierarchy is exception is of this. Exception class hierarchy is whatever exceptions class we have in the JDK which is already designed, hierarchy is like this. Say you have first object class. This is object class. Object class is having a subclass which is throwable. Throwable is the subclass of object class. Throwable is having again subclass which is exception. Which is exception, and one more which is error. Then subclass, whatever exceptions we have used so far are all the subclasses of this, right? Subclasses of this. So now exception is the superclass of any types of exception which is coming from the try block or any try block, right? So we have, say, now what advantages we can take here is, suppose I have a class A, one class A, and I have class B. B extends A, and I have one more class, say class C, and C also extends A, right? Then what will be the class hierarchy for this? So this is class A, this is class A you have, and A is having two subclass, one is B and one is C. This we discussed in inheritance topic. You can go there and you can check the inheritance topic before coming to this if it is not clear. So this is A, and A is having two subclass which is B and C. Now A is one type, B is a subtype of A, and C is a subtype also of A. Now if I have a reference variable of type A, say A1 is equal to null first time, if I do like this, then A1 reference variable can have an object of new A, and it can have an object of new B also, and it can have an object of new C also. Means super type reference variable can have an object of current type only, super type only, or it can have an object of subtype, any subtype. Okay, super type reference variable can have an object of this type only, or it can have an object of subtype also, right? So the same way the exception is an object. Exception is a super type for all whatever exceptions you have seen, say arithmetic exception, number format exception, array index out of bounds exception, whatever exception. All the exception classes are the subclasses of exception class. So if I take a reference variable of type exception, E, then these can hold any type of exception which is coming from the try block. Now what we can do is we can modify this in this way. So here what we can do is okay, we have one try block, fine, this is one try block, and inside the try block, say I have inside the try block, so this is try block is having these codes, right? Now instead of writing this catch block, this one catch block I am writing for array index out of bounds exception, another catch block I am writing for number format exception, another catch block we are writing for arithmetic exception. Instead of writing these three different catch blocks for three different types of exception, what we can do is we can write only one catch block. And say I have only one catch block, and here I will define exception type reference variable E, and here I will write some SOP statement or something, whatever you want we can write here. Now on top of these try catch, I have a try block here, and assume in try block I have 100 lines of statements. Whatever statements is there in the try block and whatever exceptions is generating from the try block, all the exception object which is going to generate in try, this exception type reference variable is okay to hold that type of objects. So what we can do is, instead of writing these 3 different catch blocks, we can write only one catch block, and we can say, okay, whatever exceptions are coming from the try block, let this catch block handle all that exceptions, right? So this also we can do instead of writing this many try and catch blocks. So that also we can do. So what I'll do now is I'll change this one with that, okay, and say instead of writing this many try and catch, I'll put all this in comment, this, right? And instead of that, here I'll write one catch. So this is catch, and this is type of exception now, exception E, right? And I'll write here directly one message printing E, and I'm printing direct same message, enter one non-zero int value as command line argument, right? Enter one non-zero int value as command line, one catch block. In one catch block I am having this. Now assume I am executing this program again, and finally I have this also, okay, I have these 2 statement also here. I'll cut it from here and put it this after try and catch. So now if I execute this statement, this program, first time I'll not give anything. Args of 0 should give an array index out of bounds exception, and the exception object which is going to generate here will be of type array index out of bounds exception, right? And now if I execute this program, then this statement, if I don't say, if I just write Java and test, not giving anything, and press enter, I'm not giving anything, then when args of 0 will try to execute, this will not find the element in that array, and it gives here array index out of bound exception object is generated. Now this array index out of bound exception is actually array index out of bound exception type. Now in try block these 2 statements are not going to execute, so JVM checks, is there any catch block is found which can hold this object? Yeah, exception. Exception is a super type E, it is exception, then this starts immediately pointing to this. Now this catch block is going to execute, right? Means the catch block is having of exception type reference variable, and that can handle this array index out of bounds exception type object because it is super type reference variable, right? But now, okay, this is handled. Then it continues here, E will be printed, but E is going to print the exception type. Which type of exception it is? Array index out of bound exception will be printed, fully qualified name, and then it prints here enter one non-zero int value as command line argument. Then it continues, because the exception is handled, it comes here Y, and it comes here main ends. All this is going to print, right? First exception is handled. If it is not first exception, if it is the second statement is giving an exception, assume the second statement is giving exception, and the exception is say it is now first I am executing like this, Java and test 1, and I am giving a command line argument, say it is hi, and press enter. When you do like this, then first statement got the value here, S value is stored is hi. Then when second statement tries to convert this hi to integer type, which is not possible, so this statement gives an exception which is number format exception, right? So this number format exception is going to be thrown, and JVM checks catch block is there, okay, catch block is there. In this catch block any reference variable exception type is found. Exactly particular type is not found, but it has super type. So super type reference variable can point to this, and that exception is handled, and we're going to print E again, but this E is going to print now the exception type. What exactly the exception type is? Number format exception, fully qualified name, gives the message, and it continues with this and this, right? Same way again, if I execute with execute with say Java and test1 with 0, test1 with 0. Then here it is S0 is stored, 0 is convertible, so X is also stored 0, and when you are writing 10 divided by 0, then this statement gives exception, and exception is of type arithmetic exception, right? Now again JVM checks catch block, corresponding catch block. Okay, catch block is there, which is having the reference variable of super type. Okay, it is super type, so super type can point to this object, and this catch block is executing. Again y prints and main ends also prints. So whatever exceptions are coming from your try block, now all that exceptions can be handled by this try and catch, right? Now let's try this and execute and see the output. So first time I'm not giving anything. Run configuration and arguments, nothing is there, right? Apply and run. It is exception king. Main started, array index out of bounds, exception. And enter one. It is not this actually. It should be saved and execute. Run configuration, no command line argument, and run. So fine. Main started, array index out of bounds, exception, and enter one non-zero int value. Y value is this, and main ends, right? This executing these two means it is continuing the execution. Now if I give some value, say run and run configuration, and it is say hi, apply and run, giving exception, but this time exception is of type number format exception, and it continues. And the same catch block is going to alter the exception, but the exception type is now number format exception. This is E. Now again if I give say run configuration, and this is 0, apply and run. Again same only, but the exception type is arithmetic exception, and the message is dividing by 0. Again it continues. So in these whatever exceptions are coming, all the exceptions are going to handle by the same catch block. Now assume if I run with 2, run configuration, and give the argument here as 2. If I give 2, apply and run, no problem, it is fine. Main started and main ends. So this catch block was not executed because no exception coming from try block, and control directly comes into this and it executes, right? So this is, you can write one catch block with the multiple to handle the multiple type of exceptions which is coming from the same try block, instead of writing this multiple catch blocks. But assume now I am writing in this way. Say I have these catch blocks are also there, these catch blocks are there, and finally here I have this. Or actually say this is y I am printing, and sorry, it is y should be printed, and print main ends, right? Now 3 different types of exception may come from the try block, so I am using 3 different catch block. Apart from that, assume I have some other chances there, maybe say some chances there which may give some exceptions, like we'll write here some statement and say it is okay, I'll write and some statement. Assume some statements are there in try block which may give some exception, and for that exception corresponding catch block is not available. Then what you can do is, suppose what I will do is catch, and it is exception type E. What this means, and I'll write here it is exception block. It is exception block, right? In this. Now, if any exceptions are coming from your try block, so first statement, if it gives exception, the exception will be array index out of bounds exception. Catch block is available for that. Corresponding catch block is available. Or these also can handle the same exception, right? Or the second one gives the exception, second statement, it gives number format exception, catch block is available, and these also can handle the same exception again. Or if this statement gives an exception, it is arithmetic exception, catch block is available, or this catch block also can handle same exception because it is super type. Now if this statement gives exception, which catch block is going to execute, whether it is this one or it is this one, because both can handle that. This can handle because the exception type is exactly same type, and this exception also can handle because it is super type. Now which one is going to handle this? So here I have written exception block, and in this I have written E, okay, or I will not write E, I will write it is array index out of bounds block. This is array index out of bound block, and this also I will not print now. So first statement, if first statement gives exception, then two catch block matching, two catch block is found, first catch block and the last catch block. Now which catch block is going to handle that exception? If the first catch block handle that exception, the output should be array index out of bounds exception, and if the second last one holds that, then the output should be exception block, right? This is block, this is block, right? Now okay, try this. Run configuration, and I will not give any argument in this, no argument. Apply and run, right? So array index out of bounds exception block is executed. Why it is so? Because it is first, it is coming before to this. Now if multiple catch blocks are there in try and catch, with one try multiple catch blocks are there, then when any exceptions comes in try block, how JVM will verify that which catch block can handle it? So what JVM does is JVM applies the top to bottom approach. Whether first statement is giving exception, or the second statement, or the third statement, or whatever, any exception comes in try block, JVM goes to the first catch block first. Is it okay to handle the exception? Or if it is okay, this first catch block only is going to handle the exception. If not okay, then it verifies with the second one. Second one is matching with that exception type. Matching means it will handle that. If it is not matching, then it goes to the next one. If next one is okay to handle that exception, then that will be handled by this catch block. Not okay, it goes to the last one. If last one can handle the exception, then it is going to handle by this last catch block. If this is also not able to handle the exception, then the exception flows to the JVM, and the program execution terminates abnormally because the exception was not handled, right? So in this way JVM verifies how exception, which catch block, when multiple catch blocks are there, which catch block is supposed to handle the exception, right? This is how top to bottom approach it verifies in this way. So when first statement here it is giving an exception, first catch block only is matching with that exact type. If first catch block is not matching, then it will come into this. So to prove that, suppose the first catch block is not available, right? First catch block is not available. Now what will happen? When I will not give any argument, first comes here. This is not having any argument, so it gives a array index out of bounds exception. Now JVM checks first catch block. Is it okay? Not okay, because the exception type is array index out of bounds exception, and this is number format exception. Then it goes to the second catch block. Second catch block is okay? Not okay. Then it goes to the last one, matching, okay, exception type. It can handle any type of exception, so it will come directly to this. You just run it because argument is not there, so it is exception block, right? Now if this is also not available, then when the second statement gives exception, number format exception, this is not available, so it will verify with this first, not okay, and comes directly to this. So verification is in this way. Because of this reason, when you are writing multiple catch blocks with one try block, you have to remember one point, that the catch block here is for array index out of bounds exception, and this is number format exception, this is arithmetic exception, this is exception. So this exception, array index out of bound exception, is a subtype of exception. Number format exception is also a subtype of exception. Array index out of bounds exception is also a subtype of exception. So exception is the super type. Now what I will do is, if this one only I write at the beginning, it is not here, it is at this point. So it is at this point and it is here. Now remaining all is an error. Why it is compilation failed? Because this remaining all gives exception, because whatever exceptions are coming in try block, and if it search from top to bottom approach to find the corresponding catch block, then first block only is enough to handle any type of exception. First block is only enough to handle any type of exception. Now remaining catch blocks are never going to execute whatever type of exception is coming from try. Only first catch block handles all the exceptions, remaining is never going to get a chance to execute, and because of that compiler tells that these statements are not reachable, these catch blocks are not reachable. Now what you have to do in this case is, if when the multiple catch blocks, when you are writing multiple catch blocks in one try block, you have to take care that if the classes which you are taking in the catch blocks, that classes are having inheritance relationship or not. If the classes in catch blocks are having inheritance relationship, then the subtype should come first and then only the supertype should place. So this should be not here, this should be at last, right? So when you are writing multiple catch block with one try block, you have to take care of this point that the catch blocks which you are writing multiple, these classes are having any inheritance relationship or not. If those classes are having inheritance relationship, then subtype should come first and then the supertype should come. If supertype comes first, then subtype becomes unreachable and it is a compilation error, right? So this point you have to take care very carefully. Now you have to know the hierarchy of the exception classes. So what are the exception classes available, and you have to find out the exception classes hierarchy, how it is. Then only you can write these catch blocks in this way. Now if it is so, then why will you write when this catch block is there, this catch block is also there, and this is also there? Then why will you write this exception? Why this is required? Whatever statements I have written in try, whatever possibility, whatever chance is there the exception may raised, for each exception one corresponding catch block is designed already. Then why this is required again? If by any chance, if the corresponding catch block is not found for any particular exception which may come in try block, then that is not going to be handled, and there is a chance that the remaining execution of your program may terminate. So to overcome with this problem, what you can do, okay, whatever catch block you have or whatever you understood, okay, these statements may give this type of exception. Apart from this, for each this exception you are writing the corresponding catch block. Apart from this, if this try block gives any other type of exception for which the corresponding catch block is not available, then you are taking one catch block. Okay, if the corresponding catch block is not found, then this is always ready here to handle any type of exception. Because of this reason you will have to write this one. Okay, fine. So now again, if one catch block can handle any type of exception, then why this many catch blocks you need to write? Why it is so? Maybe because in certain scenario, maybe say first statement is giving an exception, and based on this type of exception I need to perform some action. Okay, and if the exception is this other type, then perform some other action. If the exception is this type, perform some other action. Each catch block is going to perform one action based on type of the exception which try block is generating, right? So if I don't take, say if this is array index out of bounds exception, then what message I want to give here? The message is enter one command line argument, right? enter one command line, that's it. But if this statement gives an exception, then what message should I give? Enter one int value as command line argument. Or if this statement gives an exception, then what message you should give? The message is enter one non-zero int value as command line argument. So depending on which type of exception the try is generating, based on that type, different types of actions I need to perform. So in that case, I cannot directly go with one exception type with the super type. If you have the requirement like this, that based on which type of exception the try block is generating, based on that I want to perform a different types of actions, then you have to go with the corresponding type of catch block. You cannot directly go with this, right? So this is one important point you have to remember here, that if the exception classes are having inheritance relationship, then the super type should come last and the subtype should come first. In this case, the exception class is super type for all these three, right? You need to know the hierarchy of exceptions classes, and these three, array index out of bounds exception, number format exception, arithmetic exception, these three are not having any inheritance relationship, so these can be in any order. So suppose I'll take this from here, this is not here, and this is at the beginning, okay, this is here at this point. So first is arithmetic exception, and then array index out of bounds exception, then number format exception, and then exception. So these order can be in any order, because these three classes are not having any inheritance relationship, but these always should be at last because this is having inheritance relationship, right? So this is when you will write multiple catch block with one try block. These are the things you have to take care. One more important point you have to remember here is if one statement of try block is giving an exception, then remaining statement of the try block is not going to execute, and from that statement only the control goes to the corresponding catch block, and remaining catch blocks are not going to execute, right? So this is this multiple catch block with different types. Next is from Java 7 we got a new feature that when you have the requirement like this to write multiple catch blocks, instead of writing this, say this is not here now, instead of writing this multiple catch blocks, what you can do is you can take, so this is one catch block I'm writing, and in that one OR operate, and you write here array index out of bounds exception, or it is number format exception, or E, then this is not required, right? So now what we did is, in one catch block only, it is not very specific type and not even super type also. In one catch block I am writing array index out of bound exception, or arithmetic exception, or number format exception. Whatever exception, any one of these three type is coming from the try block, then same catch block can handle this. Now this E reference variable is going to treat here once with number format exception, or array index out of bounds exception, or it can be arithmetic exception. You no need to write multiple catch blocks for that. In one catch block only you can do that. But when you are writing this exception catch block in this way, you have to take care one point very importantly, that these classes should not have any inheritance relationship. So you cannot write here one more, say it is exception, not valid, it's complete fail, right? This is not okay. Now if it is exception, then this only is enough to handle these types of exceptions, then why unnecessarily to declare these points? Because of that this is not here. When you are writing exception in this way, this features is from Java 7, then this inheritance relationship should not be there with this, and all this you can write in this way. The order of these all types can be any order, but it should not have any inheritance relationship. So here in one single catch block is going to execute, is going to handle multiple different types of exception, and the message you can give anyway, right? Whatever you want, you can give a message, common message for all of this, or common type of actions you can perform if any one of these three types of exceptions are coming from the try block. So in this we have seen different ways to use try and catch with exception handling, and one try block multiple catch block, or one try block multiple catch blocks, or this one single catch block which is having multiple exception types can be handled with one catch block, or hierarchy of the catch block, and how the catch block evaluates when multiple catch blocks are there for one try block, right? So in the next session we will see the finally block with try and catch. So thanks for watching my video.